Hey friends, it's the Rocket Noob. How you doing? And here we talk about building and flying model rockets and high power rockets. And welcome to the stream. In this stream today, we are going to be going through my OpenRocket fleet, really, my simulation fleet. And I don't really know what's in here. I haven't gone through this in a long time, but I've got some designs that I made myself, some of which I built, some of which I have not. And a lot of my kits, I have simulations of a lot of my kits, which I like to have, but I'm probably missing some. And so a lot of this stuff came from an old computer, and I pulled it off there, and I'm finding some of the data is corrupted, so we're going to see what's even there. And I don't remember exactly everything that's in here. It's been a while since I've looked at some of these. Some of these I designed on an older version of OpenRocket, so we might go through and update a few things if we have to. Yeah, so we are basically going to take a look at my fleet. And if you see anything you like and you're interested in it and you want to build it, like if it's one of my scratch builds or something, send me an email. In the email address is in my channel. Go ahead and send me an email. I will send you the OpenRocket file. And yeah, it'd be an honor if somebody built one of my model rockets that I designed. So let us just take a look here. I'm going to start by opening up OpenRocket. Let's see. Let's just open up. Well, I have all these ones that are already open. So let's see here. Okay, so we're going to open. Hopefully this will open into my OpenRocket files file folder. And like I said, I tried to make sure that all of these are actually current. So let's see. We have OpenRocket files, OpenRocket old versions. So this is my current folder, and I feel like there are definitely some things that are missing in here, but I've got this folder called Simulations My Fleet, and I have a lot of stuff in here, some of which I've built and some of which I have not. So some of these simulations I created myself, especially the ones that are kits. Either I created it myself by carefully measuring all the parts and entering the data into OpenRocket, or I found a version online. And when you find a version online, sometimes they're accurate and sometimes they're not. So you have to might have to correct a few things. Some of them were created by an absolute OpenRocket artist who, if you are on the Rocketry forum, you may be familiar with. He goes by the name Katesh on OpenRocket, and I would take his files, some of which he helped me with, and then if I needed to adjust something, he makes the OpenRocket files that look exactly like classic Estes kits. And to do that, sometimes he has to put extra little parts on there so he can make a hook or things that don't really function in the simulation. So sometimes I'll take all that extra stuff out. And one of the things that he will do is he's really good at making the nose cones look exactly like the nose cones. Like if you look at your typical Estes nose cone, it's sort of rounded on the tip. And if you just look at the rocket in front of us, for example, that comes to a sharp point, and none of the Estes nose cones really look like that. But that's okay because I use the simulations for figuring out what motor I'm going to use for flight data. OpenRocket uses Barrowman equations, and one of the simplifying aspects of Barrowman equations is that it assumes that a nose cone comes to a sharp point. So the fact that your simulation doesn't look exactly like your nose cone is not terrible, because the simulation shows a sharp point. The math assumes there's a sharp point. But if you want a simulation that looks very much like an Estes nose cone, check out. I'll post it when I'm done with this stream. I'll post a link in the show notes in the description to a long thread that Katesh has been working on for years and years of some beautiful simulations. And then some of these are rockets that I just designed myself. It's fun to just sort of play around, see what you come up with. And some of them I've built, and some of I have not. And as a matter of fact, there's one in particular that we're going to look at that I built, and it was one of my early designs. I really liked it a lot. I still really like it a lot. I built it as a single stager and a two stager, and it met an ignominious end. So I may have to build that one again because it was a pretty little rocket. I liked it. All right, so what you're looking at here is a simplified version of a Katesh rocket that I took. I just changed the nose cone to a point. I got rid of the hooks and everything. This is a Cosmic Explorer by Estes, which is one of my favorite rockets. And it was one of the first ones that I wanted to put a bigger motor in. This is an 18 millimeter motor tube rocket that, flies on A, B, and C black powder motors. And it's a BT-55 diameter rocket. And I thought, what if I put an E9 in there back when they sold E9s? A famously Kato-prone engine. A Kato, for newbies, is catastrophic anomaly at takeoff or catastrophe at takeoff. Basically, the motor blows out, and your rocket don't go nowhere, or it sits on the pad and burns. I like the E9s, though. I never had a Kato with them. I only flew a few of them. They were nice. They would burn and burn and burn. It was a long burner, one of the longest burning black powder motors you could get. I really loved them. And building this Cosmic Explorer with an E9, well, let's just say I never saw it again. But it flew. It just kept going and going. It was gorgeous. Anyway, one of the nice things about OpenRocket, of course, is you can tell you where your center of pressure is. And if you look here, I hope I'm on the right page. If you look here, this red dot that we're looking at here on this body tube, that is where your center of pressure is. And of course, for stability, you need your center of pressure to be behind your center of gravity. In this case, this is not an accurate place. The finished model, it was further back than this. But you need your center of gravity to be forward of your center of pressure by at least one body tube diameter. That's one caliber, we call that. And especially if you're going to modify a rocket, like you're going to put a bigger motor in it, or as in the case of a video I'm working on right now, you have a V2 semi-scale model and you cut the fins down so that they're more close to scale. You need to make sure that it's going to be stable. And this Cosmic Explorer they don't make it anymore, sadly. I really like it. But it is a prime example of a great rocket that you can just slap a bigger motor in because the fins are so big. The center of pressure is back here a little bit behind the tips of the fins. And so it worked out great. And like I said, the first time I built one of these with an E in it, it was just gone. It was early on in my model rocket career, I guess you could call it that, and flew great, but it was windier than I realized, and I had never lost a rocket before, and that was the first one for me, so that was a sad day. All right, so I'm going to take a look at one of my first scratch builds, not my very first one, but one that I really liked a lot. Let's see if it's in here. Copperhead. I called it Copperhead with booster. All right. So I loved this rocket. It was I built this as, it was a thank you gift that I made for someone. I was doing a fundraiser for a theater where I used to do acting. And if most people have never heard of me, but those of you who have may have heard my story that I got involved in model rocketry because I was a theater geek, and one day I found a model rocket set that I fell in love with, and the theater director, or the artistic director at that theater, was a NASA geek, and he and I went and flew rockets together, and I became the rocket noob. And we were doing a little fundraiser, and I wanted to come up with a thank you for people who donated to my team. And I thought, well, I could build a rocket for people. No one's ever done that, And so that's what I did. And this one, originally, I built this as a single stage rocket, and it was I liked that a lot, and that's what I gave to this friend of mine the one friend who gave me the most amount of money. I gave him this rocket, and then I decided to make a two-stager for myself. And it flew great. It flew great a couple of times. I used a Big Bertha nose cone, a plastic Big Bertha nose cone. Those can be a little hard to find now because Estes doesn't sell those anymore, but you can find balsa ones. BT60 tube, and then a BT60 to is it 50? Yeah, BT50 body tube. And then I had this idea for these forward swept fins, which I might have seen on some, ready to launch Estes kit. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of cool. And, you start out in model rocketry and you think all the fins have to go backwards, but they don't. They will stabilize the rocket going forward. And it just looked so darn cool. And then to put a booster on there and have this set of them, I tried to find an example of this, a picture of this, but I'm having trouble with some of my pictures. But I at least have the art from. Open up here, bud. I at least have the art from the OpenRocket. Edit your images using AI? No, thank you. From the OpenRocket picture art application, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But I painted it black and copper, and I didn't have a name for it. And because I painted it black and copper and I posted a picture of it on the Rocketry forum, someone suggested the name Copperhead. I thought that's a cool name. That's a cool name for a rocket. Some people like really silly names. Maybe it's pretentious. I like more serious names. Most of my rockets are named after space stuff, like constellations of things. But Copperhead, I thought that was pretty cool. I guess it's dumb of me to not be into the silly name rockets. I like the serious name rockets. I don't know why. When I first got into this hobby, I can't explain why, but I just felt like I was doing something important for the first time. I'm not going to go in there. I'm not going to go there. That's silly. But anyway, the Copperhead rocket was great. The issue with the Copperhead, however, is that it flew great several times, and then the very last time it went unstable. And I didn't understand why, but I think I figured out what it is, and I think it's this standoff. So the standoff here, the launch lug. Now this is an old version of OpenRocket. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I can put a launch lug on here now on a standoff. But a standoff essentially, in order to make a sort of a template to cut this standoff, I made a single fin. So it's made as a fin, but with Barrowman equations, which are the mathematical equations that show you where your center of pressure is on a rocket, which these simulators use, a single fin doesn't make any sense. So you can remove this, and it will sort of change the center of pressure a little bit, which you can see that little red dot moved back. But as far as I think, that's probably just a guesstimate, really, because the mathematics don't really make a lot of sense if you don't have at least 3 fins on the rocket. So the fact of the matter is, this is going to hit the wind, and it's going to affect the flight of the rocket some way or another. And I think that having it this far forward was maybe a mistake. I think that it came off the pad a little slow, and maybe it was a little windy, and maybe it just hit a cross breeze just in the right way. It caused the rocket to go unstable, and it just zipped back and forth and crashed, and it was sad. It was sad. I was very, very upset about it because it was a pretty little rocket. So if I were to do this again, I would probably, I want to go ahead and move this back. Let's see where, let me adjust the location here. I'm going to move it back a little. Oops, not that way. I'm going to move it back a little bit. I would either move it closer to between these 2 fins here, like this, or I might make 2 very, very short standoffs, one back here and one up here, and 2 very short, like a 1/4 of an inch long piece of launch lug. I might even use micro rail buttons, which you can get at railbuttons.com, and opt for like a maker beam launch rail, which I do have, and I was just thinking about it today because I have several rockets that I've set up for that, and I don't have a launch pad for it, and I thought it's high time I build myself a launch pad. The one that I had before just wasn't very well made, and I sort of toying with the idea of making myself a maker beam launch rail pad. Anyway, I love this rocket. black and copper is what I painted it. It was a real beauty. I'm gonna have to build another one because I do have all the parts except for this balsa transition, which I think I got the balsa transition at johnrocket.com, or maybe it was ASP. And I basically designed. I'm pretty sure it was John Rocket. I looked at what they had. I looked at the length of the transitions that they had, and then I designed this based on that. I designed around the parts that I had. So I designed this rocket around the nose cone, the Bertha nose cone, and the John Rocket, hand-turned balsa transition. And then, I had 1/16 of an inch basswood fins, and I did manage to make nice little airfoils out of those. I really surprised myself with how easily I could make pretty decent looking airfoils. And yeah, I really love that rocket. So I think I'm gonna have to build it again. If you're interested in building this one, feel free to send me an email. I am therocketnoob@gmail.com. Remember, noob is spelled with zeros. You can also check my channel and just send me an email, and I'll send you the OpenRocket file, and maybe you can build it yourself. Yeah, so, I started this stream kind of at last minute, and now I'm realizing I'm very hungry. Let's see what else we got here in the old file folder. There we go. All right. Ooh, Ether. This is one that I built. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, so it's telling me that the current G64 has a different thrust curve than the one that was in this has been a long time since I've opened this up. But you see here, I was going to try and find a picture of me with this rocket because it's I do have a picture. I've flown this a few times, and it's a BT-70 rocket. Oftentimes when I am designing a rocket, I'm going to check the chat here, see if anybody's watching. And nobody's watching, and that's okay. No, well, 2 people are watching. All right. Hey, watchers. Hey, viewers. Anyway, a lot of times at least at first, when I would start to design a rocket, I would see what parts were available, because the idea of making a nose cone was kind of a little bit beyond me. And so I would just sort of see what was out there and then design around it. And I had some BT-60 rockets. I had some BT-80 rockets. But I didn't have anything that was BT-70. And so I found a nose cone, a BT-70 nose cone, plastic nose cone at apogeerockets.com. And I thought, well, that's an unusual size. You don't see a lot of BT-70 rockets. I think originally I had started designing it because I had picked up a balsa nose cone from John Rocket, and I didn't really like that cone. But then I found this long ogive, which is over 10.5 inches long, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool looking. What can I design with that? So I made, I already had started building a rocket with a 24 millimeter motor tube in it. So I kind of just decided to take this half-built just body tube with motor tube and then make something out of it. So I added these little strakes, which I thought were really cool. And these are just square dowels, basically. And they're basswood square dowels, and they're 16 inches long. And then I just sort of cut a 45-degree angle in all of them. And then the fins, which I do have this. Hold on a second. Let's see if you can see it. It's behind me. It's this rocket right here. I never finished painting it. It's great. Got great primer on it. But the fins are made out of 3 plies of basswood. I was experimenting with making fins out of like multiple layers of either basswood and or balsa wood, and making my own kind of like cheap and easy plywood. And the thing that I found with that is I could sand a fin, like I could sand a taper or sand a bevel by hand a lot easier, because I could use the different levels in the wood as a kind of guide to measure. And I just used a sanding block, and I just sort of sanded until I saw the next level kind of peek through. And that worked out really well. They were very strong, despite the fact they were made out of 3 layers of 1/16 inch balsa or basswood. in the case of that rocket. And it was pretty cool. And I even had a little tab come out. It was a very thin tab. Probably not the strongest thing, but this is not a high power rocket. And yeah, it's flown a few times on some longer burning 24 millimeter composite motors, and the only thing that I've had trouble with is that I should have put for such a large rocket I should have put a thicker shock cord in. I was using some Kevlar string, some kite string essentially, and it's just so thin that it just seems to get really tangled up when it ejects, because it's a very long shock cord, and I don't know, I just get the sense that because it is a larger rocket, maybe having a very thin shock cord, even though it's plenty strong enough, it just, I had an X-form parachute. Last time I flew it, I had an X-form parachute. Everything got kind of tangled up, and I wasn't too happy with it. But it's a cool rocket. I like it. I like it a lot. I would build it again. I might even build a version with 29 millimeter motor tube, which I think I may have designed. If I want to change something, I will often just save as, and that way I can have two different versions. So this is the 29 millimeter version, because you can find centering rings, like plywood centering rings, online that will fit a 29 millimeter motor tube into a BT-70. And, I might go with different fin material, like some actual plywood as opposed to my little balsa or my little basswood layup. But, I'd be a fun little high power rocket. You don't want to push it too hard, but that's a fun rocket. Alrighty, let's see if we got any chat. Hello, Henry J. Fellows. How are you doing? Welcome to the Rocket Noob. All right, let's take another look and see what else we got here. I'm going to show you. This is my Leviathan. And this is actually the file that I used for my High Power 1 certification. And this one is really interesting. So this is an Estes Leviathan simulation, and I do believe that this is one that Katesh made. You can see the fins have the perfect shape. They're perfectly shaped exactly like the corners are curved exactly like they are on the actual rocket. And so I basically simplified the nose cone just to avoid any complication. The interesting thing about this one is that the center of pressure you can see where the center of pressure is on this rocket. And the center of gravity, when I built it, was just a little too close. It was less than 1 caliber ahead of the center of pressure. It was actually pretty close. And I went on the rocketry forum, and I said, hey, does anyone ever had a problem with these things being understable? And of course, it's an Estes Leviathan. They're not understable. And everyone was telling me, no, you don't. It's not understable, because I was like, I think I need to add nose weight. So the nose. Long story short, I did add nose weight. And how much did I add? 28 grams of, I think it was clay, or epoxy or something. Maybe clay and epoxy. And people were telling me I didn't need to do this, and maybe they were right. I've never heard of an Estes Leviathan going unstable. But I knew where the center of pressure was. I knew where my center of gravity was. I did kind of go heavy with the epoxy. I used epoxy for the fins. You don't necessarily need to do that because these are plywood fins and it's a paper rocket. But, it was my first high power rocket flight, and I didn't want to chance it. And so I put some nose weight in there. Better safe than sorry. It is okay. Somebody online saw pictures of my level 1 rocket and on my blog, and they said, oh, you used way too much epoxy. And I thought, well, oh, wow. You mean somebody overbuilt their level 1 high power rocket? Oh, no. it's okay. If your rocket's a little heavy, I mean, obviously you don't want to go crazy. Um, but I flew this on a Cesaroni H1. And do I still have the simulation here? H133, which is a nice high thrust, relatively high thrust rocket motor for a rocket like this. It was sold to me by the late great Gloria of Animal Motor Works, who passed away in the last year or two, last couple of years, unfortunately. But she sold me that motor before I was even ready. I mean, I was talking to her. It was maybe my first or second club launch, and she was our vendor. And I told her I was thinking about getting a high power certification. Hadn't bought anything from her before, and I said I was thinking about using an Estes Leviathan or something, and she said, "Oh, you need an H133, Cesaroni motor." And it was great, and it was fast and zippy and beautiful. The rocket flew great. So, I have seen people use a motor that's way too powerful for their rocket, and they definitely didn't overbuild that rocket, and probably could have used a little bit more overbuilding. So I am not embarrassed to have put nose weight in this rocket because I just didn't want to chance it. High power rocketry is a different beast than model rocketry, and I knew what the data was telling me, and so I just went ahead and did it, and I got the cert first try. And just be careful, don't overdo it, and you can get that cert. And so that's my high power. Now I wonder if, hold on, can you see my? Oh yeah, my Leviathan is back there. It's very dark though. This little silver bit right here, because it's black and silver. I wasn't very inspired on paint job. So I painted it black, and then I put a couple of silver bands where the tubes came together and made kind of a goopy mess. But every time I take it out in the summer, it gets really hot, and so I'm thinking of just painting over it. I haven't decided what colors I'm going to paint it. I'm sort of playing around here with, where'd my simulation go? Which one is it? Yeah, I was just playing around with colors here, just in OpenRocket, and I thought, well, maybe some gray and some red. I don't know. Painting over black is difficult because it's black. It doesn't have to look perfect. I've flown the rocket a few times. I'm at peace with it not looking perfect. But I think I need to lighten it up a little bit because it gets super, super hot. It's a matte black too. So it gets very hot in the summer sun, and I don't like that. And I don't like when I pick it up and the whole rocket feels hot and I haven't flown it. It feels a little dicey. My Fitbit is telling me I just made 10,000 steps, and I've been sitting here because I've been gesticulating. Anyway, OpenRocket is great. It's a great resource, especially if you are if you're going to get into high power rocketry. You need to have a simulation, but it's very important that you don't just blindly trust the simulation. You don't just make the rocket look roughly like it looks and then trust the simulation. You need to weigh the rocket after it's built and override the mass here, which you can see I did that. I had to weigh the rocket, and it was 656 grams after I put everything in it, including the parachute and the hardware for the shock cord and all that stuff, and the center of gravity. And I just you just want to make sure that your simulation is only going to give you as much information as you put in. It's only as good as the information you put in, and of course, it will not tell you certain things. Like, for example, I saw a college team go for a high power certification a few years ago, and they flew, I assume it was a cardboard and plywood rocket, and they tried to fly that on an H999, which is an insanely high thrust motor. And they probably did a sim and thought, this is going to be so cool, it's going to go so fast. The simulation is not going to tell you that motor is going to blow your rocket apart because it's made out of paper. The rocket didn't even move off the pad. The motor just burst through, and it was a little scary. Now, to be fair to that team, I don't think they should have been allowed to fly that motor. I think someone at check-in should have said, this is not the right motor for this rocket. But mistakes are made sometimes. Luckily, nothing happened. The motor had a beautiful ballistic flight up, arced over, and then hit the ground pretty hard. Didn't hit near anybody or any houses, but it was a little dicey. So it's a great resource, OpenRocket, and also RockSim if you got the money for that. But you do need to make sure you put in good information, and also, if you've got a motor that's going to make your rocket go from weighing a half pound to 350 pounds in a fraction of a second, you want to make sure you're using the proper materials and proper adhesives, because, you don't want to hurt anybody or anything. All right. So let's see what else we got here. Let's see. What else did I open up? I opened up a few things here. So we got, this one's kind of fun. I called this one Astra Javelin. I think I was inspired by some old Centauri names, and I got this. I made this sort of this fin shape that I thought was kind of cool. But this is another, I believe, BT-70 rocket design I came up with after I came up with the one that we just looked at. And I just kind of thought, I don't know, you just play around. And I thought, well, I got these strakes here, and then maybe put a little thinner strake up here. And, I haven't built this rocket, but I do think it's pretty cool. And it is one that listen, I got a lot of stuff on the build pile. I got a lot of kits. I got a lot of things I've designed, and I've got more kits than things I've designed. But you gotta make your choices, because life is only so long, and we'd love to build all the rockets, but sometimes you have to choose which rockets you get to. I do like this way this one looks. I think it's pretty cool. And, I think if I showed up to a launch with this, I'd have some folks, especially some old Centauri folks, go, I really like that. But I haven't built this yet. But if you're interested, again, I am therocketnoob@gmail.com. Hit me up in the email, and I'll send you the OpenRocket file. If you build a BT-70, get that BT-70 cone from Apogee or wherever you want, or build your own. I like that one. So let's see. What else do we have open already? So I went through the Leviathan. Cassiopeia. Okay, this is a little one. So I mentioned that I had experimented a little bit with building thin multiply fins. And I'm going to grab a rocket I built real quick. Hold on just a second. Don't run away. Don't fall over. Whoa. Do not want to kill the Fliss Kits tray before I have ever flown it. All right, somebody meme that. So this, let me pull up just my camera here and pull up my software so I can see that I'm actually showing you this. This is one of the first rockets that I built. This is a camera carrying rocket. Let me show you this. If you look in here, this little hole here is hides a hidden camera. And let me take the top off. This is one of those Super Big Bertha nose cones. This rocket is a design. Look, you see, I can stick a little camera in there, and it looks out through the bottom. So this is a design from this book, Make Rockets, Down to Earth Rocket Science, by Mike Westerfield. This is a great book. I love this book. As a matter of fact, this is the book that got me scratch building, because when I first read the Handbook of Model Rocketry, talk about, well, when you design your own rocket or when you build your own rockets, and I thought, yeah, that sounds great. That's for people with skills. I'm just going to make some kits, thank you very much. But then I got this book, which at the time was the only other book that I could really find on model rocketry, and it's just got a bunch of projects in it. You don't use kits. You use parts, pre-made parts, and then you assemble them. And I thought, and if this is the book that made me realize, oh, wait a minute, you don't need a kit. Just because you're building your own rocket, that doesn't mean you have to make every single part from scratch. And it's got a lot of really, it's really beautiful color photography. Um, I will put a link in the description once this stream is over, and check it out. It'll be an affiliate link. You can get this on Amazon. You can also get a Kindle version, which is what I had first, and then I realized I wanted the paper version. But that's the rocket I'm showing you is this one right here, the Series B booster with ICU-2 payload section. Yeah, it's basically, the idea is you have a balsa transition that hides the camera. And that was my first camera rocket. But the fins, if you look at these, this isn't part of the design. This is something that I came up with. The fins are actually made of 3 layers of, I think it's very thin basswood, and then 2 thin layers of balsa wood. And then having those layers enabled me to sand the fins so that they are tapered. Let me see if I can show you this. They're tapered. And I did that by hand. And the fact is, like, I used, like, the tip edge is basically the thickness of the basswood inside. So I would just sand down to that. And then I would slowly sand the whole surface until it was flat. I think what I did first, though, is I did the beveled edges. I did the beveled edges, and now you can see that it's not quite the right geometry, but it's almost like a Nike booster shape, because I bevel the edges, and that makes a straight bevel. But then when you sand a taper into the fin, then the bevel gets thinner as it gets closer to the tip of the fin. And these are really strong. They're just a core of basswood with balsa wood skins and a thin little. This is a through the wall. I built this through the wall, so that it's got a thin little. I'm blanking on the term. Bit of the fin that goes through the body of the rocket to attach to the motor tube. What is that called? I'm blanking on the very basic part of a rocket, but it's great. And so that. Why did I start talking about that? I've gotten distracted. So Circe, not Circe, Cassiopeia. Nothing to do with Dragon Lady show. Cassiopeia is another rocket that I built. It's even smaller, BT-60 to BT-55, I think. And I built it to sort of fly super, super fast and super, super high. And let's see what did I think I could actually get? What kind of altitudes did I think? Oh, yeah. Like if I put an F-30 in there, what could I get? This is what I was really trying to do when I first got started. Like, what kind of rocket could I build to get just really, really high altitudes and look super cool? And I just really loved the way this looked. I mean, it looks kind of basic, I suppose, but, the idea, and I do have somewhere, I have one of these fins that I made as a prototype, and it's the same thing. It's thin basswood core, thin balsa wood skins, and I sanded beveled edges and then tapered, and it just looks really cool. I didn't finish this. I've had this design, I made this design years ago. Those fins are kind of a pain to make, and I had other things that I wanted to do, but I do like this. And this is another one where I don't actually have a picture of it, obviously, but I liked the way it looked. I thought this could be really cool. It could be really cool. Like, it's pretty simple, but this has that sort of long BT-60 Estes plastic nose cone that you would find on like the Astron Sprint XL or something like that. That comes in the current BT-60 pack. Speaking of which, by the way, if you are looking to buy stuff on EstesRockets.com, I do have a coupon code. It is AWA10. That'll save you 10% on your next purchase. So, if you're going to EstesRockets.com to buy stuff, use my coupon code. It'll support the channel. It'll save you 10%. Now, let's take a look and see if we can find some of my actual fleet of... Well, we've already looked at the Leviathan, the Cosmic Explorer. But I tend to try and find. I like to try and make or find simulations for all of the Estes rockets and other rockets that I can. And if I can't find one, I will make one. And do I have some of them are a little trickier than others. Like for example, I have that Fliss kits. Oh gosh, I might not be able to find this one. The Fliss kit, the one that I almost knocked over there, the Fliss kits tray, which is a cluster rocket. Oh, my fleet. Oh, let's open that. That's a cluster rocket. The thing that's tricky about that is that it has canted motor tubes. So they are not straight up and down. They are at an angle. And that makes for a really big smoke trail and flame, and it's pretty cool. And you can't currently. I don't have that in here. I know that I made one. I measured all the parts carefully. You can make a 3-motor cluster rocket, but you can't really make the canted motor tubes. But that's okay. Sometimes all you need to do is get something close enough that you just need to know kind of roughly how high it's going to fly or what engine delay you need. Estes Hornet. Oh, this was one I like. I've built a few of these. And I find it really useful, especially like, you buy an Estes kit and it'll tell you what engines to buy, what Estes engines to buy, and what altitude to expect. But there's all kinds of variables in there. Like, for example, how heavy is your paint job? People may not realize this, but do I have a rocket up here? I have a rocket above me, and it's a beautiful rocket, and people don't often believe it, but the paint job is half the weight of the rocket. Like if I hadn't painted it, it would fly a lot higher than it actually does. Now I tend to paint a little heavy because I paint a lot of primer on. I won't sand all the primer off. I wet sand the primer so that it's nice and smooth, and then I will do several coats of paint, including a very wet coat that runs together nice and glossy. But it just tends to make a heavier rocket. So you get a closer idea if you have a simulation of what a particular Estes engine is going to do to your rocket. I mean, it'll tell you that a Big Bertha will fly to whatever it'll fly to on the package, but you might have a Big Bertha that's a little light or a little heavy. I find that, for example, Big Bertha is a good example. A C65 is supposed to be a classic engine you fly a Big Bertha on. I don't like using C65s because 5 seconds is too long. My simulation told me, and it is right, that a 3-second delay is perfect for my Big Bertha. But also, we got more options now than just Estes motors. We also have things like Quest Q-Jets, which are their own thing, or there are a lot of other motors out there. And so if you're going to go fly something, and you want to put something bigger in it than the recommended pack, something a little bit more energetic than the recommended package of an Estes kit, you kind of want to know what delay am I going to need, how high is it going to fly, like especially if you don't want to get these caught in a tree, like if you spend a lot of time on them. So I find that having simulations of my own fleet to be really helpful. And so I try to make a simulation of everything I got. Now, it's been, like I say, it's been a long time since I've been through these. And I don't have, for example, an Estes Viking anymore. It's fine. I built these at Model Rocket Camp with my kids. I say my kids, my students. But that's, but it's like going through this every now and then, not a bad idea. Oh, here's an interesting one. Estes Monarch, no paint. So this rocket, I'm going to show you this rocket. All right, so the rocket that I was talking about that weighs half of it is paint. It's this one. I think it's very pretty, but I weighed it as I was building it. I weighed all the parts, then I glued all the parts together, and I weighed it again. And mass with motors. Let's get rid of that motor here. It was 57.4 grams, and I weighed that, and that's what I weighed it. And then I painted it, and Let's see. Estes Monarch. And it's 65 grams. Is that right? Did I do the math right on that? 65 before it was 57.4. I think there's, you know what? I think that this actually represents just the primer, because this rocket was. I haven't weighed this rocket in a while, but I do remember weighing this and being surprised how much weight had been added. Anyway, so let me just check and see if there are any questions in the chat real quick. I'm on the wrong page. No question in the chat. That's all right. I got 4 concurrent viewers right now. Hey, how's it going? It is the Rocket Noob, where we talk about building and flying model rockets and high-power rockets. And we're just kind of going through my fleet here. I'm going to have to go pretty soon because I need a snack, and then I have to pick up my little rugrat from school. Don't know why I called him that. He's not a rugrat. He's a weasel. Anyway, let's look at 1 or 2 more rockets here. And let's see. We got anything good here? Anything interesting? Any scratch builds? Quest Courier, is that... that's empty. That is the... that's the egg lofter that Quest sells. Skywolf. Okay, here's an interesting one. So the Skywolf, you might be familiar with the White Wolf rocket. And that is based on the Skywolf rocket that was designed, and it's not blue, it's yellow. I don't know what happened to the colors here. This is my simulation that I made of a kit. It was a commemorative National Sport Launch rocket that they had some at johnrocket.com. As a matter of fact, I think they still have one, and I bought the second to last one several years ago. But it's a cool little rocket. It is it's got a 38 millimeter motor tube, or is it 29? Well, this says 38. What is the other one? Is the other one the original? No, I think it's got 38 millimeters. So you could actually fly this on a high power motor if you wanted. Yeah, this is the one that I made. You could fly this on a high power motor if you wanted to. It's very little. You'd be kind of crazy to do this. It's supposed to whistle. Mine doesn't whistle because I didn't realize for a rocket to whistle, the fin edges have to be square, and I obsessively airfoil almost all of my my fins, and so mine doesn't whistle. But it's a pretty rocket, and this rocket was created as a commemorative National Sport Launch rocket back in, I think it was 2017 or something like that. No, it was even earlier than that. It was probably 2015, 2014. And like I say, they still got one at John Rocket, but now it's called the White Wolf, and I think it might be Animal Motorworks that sells it, or somebody sells it. And there's an upscale version, but it's a cool rocket. So and I did this just by and I got to tell you, this is a very accurate looking simulation, and I did it just by carefully measuring the fins and measuring all the parts. Again, the nose cone, not really pointy, but mathematically, that's what Barrowman equations assume. So, that works just great. All right, well, this was just kind of done off the cuff last minute, and maybe I'll do more of this because I've got a lot more stuff to go through, a lot more junk in the old trunk, the old simulation fleet, and I should really separate things out by stuff I currently have, stuff that I used to have, and stuff that I haven't made yet. And I just find it really helpful to make a simulation of your fleet, especially if you're trying to decide what to take the next day. You can run a few simulations and go, okay, it's going to be kind of windy. I don't want to fly that high. Or it's going to be a great clear day. I want to fly my highest rockets. What can I put in there? Especially if you're part of a club and you have an on-site vendor, it's good to run some simulations because you'd be like, well, let's see. I got this big rocket with a 29 millimeter motor mount. I've got a Cesaroni or Aerotech vendor on the field. What could I put in there? And what kind of delay do I need? And what kind of altitude can I expect? And run some simulations, and you take, some parachutes and take your rocket, and then you kind of have an idea when you get there, depending on how windy it is or what you're feeling like, of how crazy to go with your motor selection. And I just think that's a lot of fun, and also it's just fun to play around with this stuff, So like I said, if you have any questions, or if you have any desire to build any of, if you want one of the simulations I have, I'm happy to just send them to you. Again, hit me up with an email. You can find it on my channel. If you want one of my OpenRocket files because you want to build it, that would be super cool. I would love to see what it looks like when you're done with it. So hit me up with an email, and I'll send you the OpenRocket file. Pretty simple to do. If you've never built a rocket from an OpenRocket file, it's easy. You just cut the tubes to the length they say. You're going to print out a template for the fins. You'll trace them onto some balsa or some basswood, making sure that the leading edge is parallel to the grain. You cut them out, sand them down, and glue it on, and you just make your own kit. It's pretty easy, pretty simple, pretty fun. All right, I think that is going to do it for me, the old rocket noob, and thanks for hanging out with me. Maybe we'll do more of this in the future. And yeah, have a good one. Just real quick, had a question in the chat. Can RockSim files from Lock be imported into OpenRocket? Yes, they can. Unless something has changed, they're compatible. You can switch back and forth between OpenRocket and RockSim, and yeah, some of the stuff I have, as a matter of fact, originated as RockSim files that I found on some website. I can't remember which one. And you just convert them. Like sometimes things are a little weird when you import a RockSim file into an OpenRocket file, but then you can just save it as an OpenRocket file. So RockSim's great. No complaints with it, but it's more expensive than free. So yeah, check out OpenRocket. And if you like it a lot and you want to pay for it, buy RockSim. All right, catch you later. Bye. Bye, he says awkwardly, forgetting his hotkey. All right, bye.